At Thanksgiving dinner, my husband's family gave gifts to everyone except me. Ever have one of those moments where you feel like an outsider in a room full of people who are supposed to be your family? Yeah, that was me this past Thanksgiving. I married into the Kingsley family 3 years ago. My husband, Adam, comes from this picture-perfect, tight-knit, we do everything together type of family. Big holiday dinners, group vacations, a family group chat that never shuts up. At first, it felt kind of sweet, like something out of a Hallmark movie. But I learned pretty fast, it's only picture-perfect if you play by their rules. And me? I've never been great at pretending. So let me set the scene. Thanksgiving dinner. Long, glossy dining table. Candles. Crystal. Linen napkins folded into perfect triangles like some Pinterest board exploded in Sylvia's dining room. Sylvia being my mother-in-law, of course. Queen bee. Classic rich matriarch energy. She runs the show, and everyone bows down to her, especially her daughters, Melanie and Tara. I'd spent the morning in the kitchen helping chop and plate and keep the toddlers from sticking forks in outlets. You know, the usual your family now contributions. Everything seemed normal until dessert. That's when Sylvia stood up and smiled like the Grinch about to drop a bomb on Whoville. Before we enjoy this beautiful pecan pie, she said, we have a little something for everyone. Before we go further, don't forget to like this story, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Everyone at the table clapped like this was a tradition, which apparently it was. Sylvia's annual Thanksgiving gifts. Something I hadn't been around for before. Adam and I had spent the previous holidays with my parents, but this year, we stayed local. Sylvia opened a bag and started handing out gifts. Not little trinkets either. Chanel perfume, leather gloves, watches, spa packages, custom wallets with initials engraved. Even the grandkids got these cute monogram sweaters and gift cards. Everyone was laughing and gushing and thanking her like they were on The Price is Right. And me? I got nothing. No bag. No envelope. Not even a whoops, yours is still coming. Just silence. I sat there awkwardly, pretending to admire someone else's perfume bottle while my stomach sank. Maybe it was a mistake? Maybe she forgot? Then I saw her face. Sylvia looked right at me, and she smiled. Not an oops, I messed up smile. A smug, intentional, yeah, I left you out on purpose smile. I glanced at Adam, waiting for him to say something. To ask his mom, hey, did you forget Camille? Or anything to break the weirdness. But he just sat there, opening his new watch, looking pleased as hell. Melanie leaned across the table and said, oh my gosh, I love mine. Mom, you always go above and beyond. Tara nodded. Seriously, thank you. It's always the highlight of the night. Highlight of the night? Are you kidding me? I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice that I'd been skipped. Nothing. Even the people who liked me just avoided eye contact, like it was too awkward to acknowledge. Like I was some stranger who wandered in and didn't know the rules. After dinner, I slipped into the guest bathroom, closed the door, and just stood there. I wasn't gonna cry. I refused to let them have that. But God, it stung. I kept asking myself, why me? I'd never been anything but polite. I helped with the meal. I showed up early. I brought a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford because Sylvia once said she liked it. I tried. I tried hard. And this? This was how they showed me I didn't belong. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror. You're not crazy, I whispered. They really did that. I knew right then I had a choice. I could shrink, laugh it off, make excuses. Or I could give my own gift, one they wouldn't forget. I walked back into the dining room and saw Sylvia pouring herself wine, her daughters glowing, Adam deep in some boring football chat with his dad. I cleared my throat. Actually, I said, loud enough to cut through the chatter. I brought something too. Everyone turned. Some smiled. Others looked confused. Sylvia raised an eyebrow. Oh. I nodded and walked over to my purse, pulling out a small wrapped box, one I hadn't planned to give just yet. But after what just happened, timing was perfect. Since we're exchanging gifts, I said calmly, this is for you, Sylvia. She took it, surprised. Oh, well, thank you, Camille. She unwrapped it slowly, dramatically, like she expected a cheap candle or a scarf or something harmless. Instead, she pulled out a USB drive. Just a tiny, ordinary flash drive. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked, eyes narrowing. I smiled sweetly. "Let's just say it's a collection of receipts. Thought it was time we all shared something." And with that, I sat down, picked up my wine, and took a long, slow sip. Sylvia held the USB stick between two fingers like it might be dirty. You could see her brain working, trying to calculate what was on it, whether it was worth playing along, or if she should just fake a thank you and slip it in a drawer. But curiosity? That's a powerful thing. "Edward," she said to her husband with a forced little chuckle, "be a dear and bring my laptop from the den." The entire room fell into this strange silence, curious, tense. The same kind of silence that hits before a storm. Adam leaned toward me and whispered, "What's on the flash drive?" I didn't look at him. "You'll see." And oh, he would. Edward came back with the laptop, still chuckling like this was all just part of the holiday fun. Sylvia plugged in the drive. A single file popped up on the desktop. "To the woman who forgot me," Tara snorted. "Seriously?" "But Sylvia," she paused. Something in her gut must have warned her this wasn't just a joke. She double-clicked the file anyway. A PowerPoint presentation opened. First slide. "Welcome to a crash course in Sylvia Kingsley's holiday hypocrisy." The room blinked. Sylvia muttered, "This is ridiculous." Slide 2 loaded. Screenshots. Emails. Receipts. Let me back up. See, Sylvia runs a small charity foundation. It's her pride and joy. She brags about it constantly, always talking about the community work she does and how it brings purpose to her life. She's also extremely selective about who gets what roles on the board, her daughters, her friends, anyone she can control. About a month before Thanksgiving, I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping. Okay, I was a little. But she left the door open and I was literally right there. She was whispering to someone about moving some donation funds around. Something about keeping it off the books. I didn't think much of it at first. But later, I dug into the public records. And what I found wasn't just shady. It was illegal. Back to the PowerPoint. Slide 3 showed Sylvia approving the transfer of charity funds to a consulting account tied to a shell company in Melanie's name. Slide 4. A detailed email thread where she asked Tara to pre-authorize reimbursements for luxury goods, things that had nothing to do with the charity. Slide 5. A photo of the receipt for the $1,200 handbag she donated to herself last quarter. I watched as her face went pale. Melanie gasped. "Wait, what is this?" Tara turned red. "That's photoshopped." "It's not," I cut in calmly. "It's all public. You just needed to know where to look. And your mom was kind enough to leave her password written on a post-it under her desk drawer." Adam looked like he'd been sucker punched. "Camille," he started. "Why would you?" "Why would I what?" I asked. "Do my homework? Protect myself? Make sure I didn't get steamrolled again this year like I was invisible." He fell quiet. Edward stood up, slowly, staring at the laptop. "Sylvia," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "Is this real?" She didn't answer, just stared at the screen like if she blinked, it would all disappear. "It's fake," she finally said. "She's twisting everything. You know how Camille can be." "I do," Edward interrupted. "Which is why I believe her." Boom. The room cracked in half. Melanie jumped up. "So now we're just attacking Mom at the dinner table?" "She literally left me out of the family gifts," I said. "And you're mad I gave her something in return?" Tara looked like she was about to cry. Edward just shook his head. "I'm going to call the accountant. Right now." Sylvia stood up fast, knocking over her wine glass. Red spilled across the tablecloth like blood in a crime scene. "You ungrateful little," she started, eyes locked on me. I stood too. Calm. Steady. "No. Don't go there," I said, my voice low but clear. "You don't get to humiliate me in front of your family and then play victim when I defend myself." She was breathing hard now, red in the face, hands clenched. Adam stood between us. Everyone calmed down, but it was too late. Sylvia clutched her chest suddenly. Her eyes went wide. "Mom." Melanie rushed to her. Sylvia swayed. I can't." And just like that, she collapsed. Chaos exploded. Edward shouted for someone to call 911. Tara was already dialing. Melanie was sobbing. Adam was frozen, staring at me like I had personally summoned karma from the depths. But I just stood there, feeling nothing. Not cold, not cruel, just clear. Sylvia had finally cracked the mask. The paramedics came fast. She was conscious when they took her, but shaken. High blood pressure, they said. Stress. Shock. They asked who would ride with her to the hospital. Everyone looked at Adam, but he looked at me, and I looked away. The morning after Thanksgiving, the Kingsley family group chat was dead silent. No cheery, happy Black Friday messages. No memes. No photos of leftovers or holiday deals. Just silence. Sylvia was still in the hospital, mild heart episode, they said. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to keep her overnight for monitoring. She'd be fine, physically. But her empire? Not so much. Adam and I barely spoke on the drive home. I could feel the tension rolling off him like heat from a car engine. When we got inside, he finally turned to me and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him. "You mean why didn't I warn you before I exposed your mother at Thanksgiving dinner?" "Yeah," he said, tone sharp. "Exactly that. Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said honestly. "And because I didn't owe you the courtesy after watching you sit there and say nothing when she humiliated me in front of everyone." He flinched. "You think I didn't notice?" I went on. "Every single person at that table got a gift. Except me. And you said nothing." Adam rubbed his face, exasperated. "It's just how my mom is, Camille. She tests people." I laughed bitterly. "That wasn't a test. That was a message. And you let her send it." While he stewed in guilt or denial, probably both, I pulled out my laptop and logged into the folder I'd hidden on my drive. I hadn't even used everything in the USB file. Just the most incriminating stuff. The tip of the iceberg. But now that the iceberg was exposed, I was ready to let it all melt. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Sylvia had been funneling money from her foundation, the Sylvia Kingsley Women's Initiative, into shell accounts for years. Not just under her own name, but under Melanie's and Tara's too. Thousands in business expenses that were really designer handbags, first-class flights, luxury hotel stays. Donations that never made it to the women's shelters they were meant to support. One file was labeled PR-friendly versions, a collection of photos and stories crafted to make Sylvia look like a saint. One showed her handing a check to a small organization, except that organization had shut down 3 years prior. It was all fake. All of it. I called Erin, a friend of mine who worked in nonprofit compliance. She owed me a favor, and I needed an expert to look at everything. 2 hours later, she called me back, voice low and serious. "Camille, this isn't just unethical. It's criminal. If someone reports this, Sylvia could be facing a full federal audit. Maybe even charges." I exhaled slowly. Could Edward be held responsible? Erin paused. "If he was knowingly signing off on things, maybe. But if you have proof he didn't know." I did. Several email chains showed Sylvia brushing off Edward's questions or deliberately excluding him from major transactions. He was a figurehead, a prop, but a prop who now had to choose a side. That night, he did. Edward showed up at our house with a manila folder and eyes that looked like they hadn't closed since yesterday. Adam opened the door. "Dad?" Edward ignored him and looked at me. "Camille, I owe you an apology." I blinked. "For what?" "For not seeing it sooner," he said, stepping inside. "For assuming the issue was between you and Sylvia, when the truth was so much worse." He handed me the folder. Inside? Bank statements, personal ledgers, printouts of donation records that didn't match the public filings. "I dug into the safe at home," he said. She had paper backups of everything she thought was buried. Adam looked between us, confused. "Wait, you're saying Mom?" "She's been lying to all of us," Edward said. "For years." Melanie and Tara, meanwhile, were falling apart on social media. Tara posted some half-hearted apology on Instagram. "We were misled, too. We trusted someone we shouldn't have." Melanie took a different route, defensive, angry, threatening legal action for defamation. But she had her name on accounts, on invoices, on the lease of a Beverly Hills outreach office that had never actually existed. She wasn't innocent. Neither was Tara. But the difference between them and Sylvia? They weren't good at hiding it. Back at the house, Adam sat quietly while I sorted through the new documents. "You're really doing this, huh?" he asked softly. I glanced at him. "Doing what?" "Blowing it all up." I paused. "Would you still love her if she weren't rich? If the house, the name, the reputation, if it all disappeared?" He didn't answer. And that silence said everything. Later that night, Edward sent a formal report to the state charity board. He copied me on the email. Subject line: formal allegation, misuse of nonprofit funds, the Sylvia Kingsley Foundation attached. Every file I gave him. Every email. Every screenshot. Every receipt. The next morning, I got a thank you from the board, along with a request for a follow-up call. Sylvia didn't know it yet, but the dominoes were falling. And this time, no amount of holiday charm or custom gift bags could stop them. 2 days after the report was filed, Sylvia came home from the hospital. No welcome home banner. No family reunion. Just a cold, tense silence that had wrapped itself around the Kingsley estate like a noose. According to Edward, she barely spoke. Didn't even ask about the foundation. She knew. The silence wasn't confusion. It was strategy. She was planning her next move. What she didn't know, there wasn't going to be one. The very next morning, the State Office of Charitable Affairs froze her nonprofit's assets. Edward forwarded me the email. No fanfare. No grand victory dance. Just a quiet confirmation that her house of cards had officially collapsed. It should have felt satisfying. It didn't. What I felt was relief. Like a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying finally slid off my shoulders. Adam, on the other hand, was spiraling. I found him sitting on the edge of the bed that night, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. "She's going to lose everything," he said. "She already did," I replied, folding laundry. "She just didn't notice until the spotlight turned off." He looked at me. "You could have let me handle this. You didn't have to go nuclear." I dropped the towel, turned to him. "Adam, you didn't handle anything. You watched your mother humiliate me in front of everyone. You said nothing. You let me sit there while she passed out $300 gifts like candy and didn't even ask why I got skipped." "I didn't think exactly," I cut him off. "You didn't think. You didn't see me. And now you're upset that I finally stood up for myself." He stood up, hands on his hips. "It's just, this isn't how families work." "No," I said quietly. "It's not how yours work. In my family, when someone's being cruel, you call it out. You don't smile and pretend everything's fine." We stared at each other, and in that moment, I saw it. Not hatred, not anger, just a sad kind of truth. We weren't on the same team anymore. Meanwhile, things got worse at the Kingsley house. Melanie's husband, who ran a business partially funded by the foundation, cut ties immediately to avoid being implicated. He moved out a week later. Tara, furious that Sylvia had used her name on shell accounts without full consent, hired a lawyer. The sisterly bond? Shattered. Edward called me one night to say they were barely speaking. "They're all trying to protect themselves," he said, "like rats on a sinking ship." "And you?" I asked. He hesitated. "I'm just trying to hold on to the truth. And I'm sorry it took your courage for the rest of us to see it." The following Saturday, I was at a bookstore cafe, trying to enjoy a quiet afternoon, when Melanie walked in. She spotted me, paused, then walked straight over. "I assume you're happy now," she said, arms crossed. I took a sip of my coffee. "Not particularly. But I'm free." "That's enough." Melanie sneered. "You embarrassed our mother in front of the entire family." "She embarrassed herself," I replied. "I just brought a flashlight." There was a beat of silence. Then she sat down across from me. "I got subpoenaed this morning," she said flatly. "They're going through my financial records, asking about things I didn't even realize I signed off on." I stayed quiet. "She used all of us," she added, voice cracking slightly. "Even Dad. Even you." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me, and for the first time, there wasn't rage or superiority in her eyes. Just defeat. "She's still blaming you," Melanie said. "Says you orchestrated this whole thing." I raised an eyebrow. "If I had that much power, do you think I'd still be married to your brother?" Melanie blinked. "You're leaving." "I'm thinking about it." She didn't say anything else, just stood and walked away, heels clicking on the tile like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. That night, I told Adam I wanted space. Not a dramatic breakup, not a screaming match, Just space. He sat there, speechless, like he hadn't seen it coming. I need to figure out if I can stay married to someone who only stands up after the damage is done, I told him. Someone who stays quiet to keep the peace, even when it's costing me mine. He nodded slowly. I'll give you space. And for once, I think he meant it. Edward sent one final message before the audit began. A short email that simply said, "Thank you for lighting the match. We needed to burn before we could rebuild." I didn't reply, but I read it twice. When you're married, people love to say things like, relationships take work. No one's perfect. Don't throw it away just because it's hard. But no one ever talks about the work it takes to keep yourself intact when your partner constantly expects you to shrink, to bite your tongue, to keep the peace at the cost of your dignity. That's what my marriage to Adam had become. I wasn't his partner. I was a liability, a problem to be managed. And the longer I sat with that truth, the heavier it became. I spent the next week at a hotel downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, peaceful. Every morning, I'd wake up and realize no one was watching me, judging my tone, or silently hoping I'd make myself smaller. It was liberating and heartbreaking, because I hadn't just walked away from Sylvia or her venomous dinners. I'd walked away from the life I built with Adam. The plans, the apartment, the hope. Adam texted a few times. Nothing cruel, nothing clingy. Just check-ins. Let me know if you need anything. I miss you. Still thinking about what you said. I didn't respond. It wasn't to be petty. It was because I needed the silence more than I needed the guilt. Meanwhile, the Kingsleys were unraveling. The charity board officially suspended Sylvia from all leadership positions. Tara and Melanie were both under internal investigation, and Edward had resigned from all advisory roles to prioritize family healing. Translation: he jumped off the sinking ship before it exploded. Sylvia, of course, played the victim to the press. She released a statement claiming she had trusted the wrong advisors and was blindsided by inaccurate documentation. The comments were brutal. Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Is there a GoFundMe for Camille's wine fund? Imagine skipping someone's Thanksgiving gift and getting a federal audit in return. It was almost funny how poetic it all felt. But still, it didn't feel like victory. Just escape. One rainy Thursday, Adam showed up at the hotel. I don't know how he found me, but I wasn't surprised. He knocked gently, holding nothing but a grocery bag and looking like someone who'd aged 10 years in 10 days. I brought your favorite tea, he said. I let him in. He sat at the little table by the window, looked at the storm outside, and said, I had no idea how much I relied on you to keep me from drowning in them. I sat across from him, silent. He went on. I thought staying neutral made me strong. That keeping the peace made me loyal. But I wasn't loyal to you. I was loyal to comfort, to denial. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you ever stand up for me? His voice cracked. Because I didn't want to believe the people I loved were capable of cruelty. And because I didn't want to lose them. And now, I already have, he said. But the worst part is realizing I might have lost you too. There it was. Not a perfect apology. Not a movie-worthy speech. Just the raw truth. And it broke me. But not in the way I expected. I cried, not for him, but for me. For the version of me that stayed quiet for too long. For the girl who sat at that Thanksgiving table, pretending to smile while her heart sank. For the woman who finally said enough. I love you, Adam said. But I don't want you to come back just because I said the right words. I want you to come back because you believe I'll do better. I nodded slowly. Then I can't come back. His face crumpled. Not now, I added softly. Maybe not ever. He stood, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. I'll wait, he said, even if it takes forever. And then he left. That night, I sat by the window, sipping the tea he brought. My favorite blend. Thoughtful, warm, comforting. But I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't Sylvia's problem. Wasn't the family scapegoat. I was just Camille. And that was more than enough. It's funny how we're taught to measure our lives by milestones. The engagement, the wedding, the holidays, the first shared apartment, the first Thanksgiving with in-laws. But no one teaches you to celebrate the moment you say, that's enough. I'm done shrinking. That was my real milestone. Not the ring. Not the name change. Not even the dramatic Thanksgiving dinner that blew everything up. It was the quiet decision I made in a hotel room, staring out at a rain-soaked street, with no applause, no witnesses. Just me. 2 months after I left Adam, I signed the lease on a small loft on the other side of the city. Big windows. Sunlight. Wooden floors that creaked when I walked across them barefoot. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I lay in bed in total silence and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of a new neighborhood. No tension. No family politics. Just the distant hum of life. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. I started going to therapy again. Real therapy this time, not the vent to your best friend over wine kind. I needed to untangle the years of quiet apologies I made for everyone else's bad behavior. I needed to stop calling betrayal a misunderstanding. One day, my therapist asked me, "When was the last time you felt safe with someone?" And I realized I'd never asked myself that. I'd only asked, do they love me? Or will they stay? But not, do they make me feel safe? That changed everything. As for Sylvia, the audit turned into a full-blown investigation. A few donors filed civil suits. The foundation was officially shut down. She issued a second public statement, this one written by lawyers, not PR reps, cold, strategic, calculated. She blamed errors and oversight. She mentioned a period of reflection. She never mentioned me, which was fine, because I wasn't part of her story anymore. And thank God for that. Adam reached out once more. A handwritten letter this time. He didn't beg, didn't guilt-trip me. He just said he hoped I was doing okay, that he was working on himself, that he understood if I never wrote back. I didn't, but I kept the letter, not because I was holding on, but because it reminded me that some people can change, just not always in time to keep you. Spring came fast. One sunny weekend, I hosted my own dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small group of people who made me feel safe, loved, and seen. Lena brought pie. My coworker turned bestie, Ray, brought his chaotic boyfriend and 3 different types of bread. We sat around the table, mismatched chairs, clinking glasses and laughing so hard it hurt. At one point, someone asked, "Camille, do you ever miss it? The big house, the name, the family holidays?" I thought about it for a second, and then I smiled. "No," I said, "not even a little." At the end of the night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen barefoot, sipping tea from a chipped mug. The dishes were piled in the sink. The floor was sticky from spilled wine. It was perfect, because nothing was fake, and no one was forgotten. You see, the gift I gave Sylvia was truth, and the gift I gave myself? Freedom. From shame. From silence. From the need to be good enough for people who were never good for me. I used to think I wanted a seat at their table. Now, I build my own, and there are no empty seats. Just real people, real love, real peace.